Evelyn, I've got no gold to offer. By sundown, you'll be wearing my ring.
Out here in the wide open land, a man's worth ain't measured by money in the bank, but by the strength in his hands and the truth in his word. Caleb Turner was just a ranch hand. Dust on his boots, calluses on his palms, and nothing more than a horse to his name. Evelyn Carter? She was the banker's daughter. Fine dresses, books from the East, promised to a man she didn't love. Two worlds that should have never crossed. But one look was all it took. One stolen moment, and one dangerous promise whispered under the western sky. You'll be wearing my ring by sundown. It was bold, reckless, maybe even foolish. But in the 1800s, love was the one thing worth fighting for, and sometimes worth dying for. Like this story so far? If it's pulling at something in your chest, or if you just love a good Wild West mystery, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories ride. Now, back to the tale. It was 1874, in the dust-swept town of Redstone, Wyoming, where the wind carried grit into a man's teeth and the sun burned so fierce it bleached the bones of cattle left too long on the prairie. Folks lived close to the land, but even closer to their reputations. A man's name could make him, or bury him, faster than a bullet. Caleb Turner was one of those names whispered half in respect, half in pity. He had no family fortune, no spread of land to his name, just a pair of strong shoulders, a horse named Ash, and a way of working that kept him alive. He was the kind of man who rose with the sun and didn't rest until the sky was thick with stars. Hands cracked from rope burn, shirt damp with sweat, yet eyes sharp as if he were waiting for something. Something the ranch couldn't give him. That something appeared one August afternoon, when the banker's daughter rode past the fence line. Evelyn Carter wasn't supposed to be there. Ladies like her stayed close to town, where boardwalks kept their shoes clean and parasols shielded them from the sun. But she rode her mare out past the river, where the grass grew tall and the dust carried wild. Her dress wasn't made for riding, too fine, too pressed, but she handled the reins with more confidence than Caleb expected. He was mending a section of split rail when he caught sight of her. At first, he thought he'd imagined it. The heat shimmered off the land so heavy that shapes bent and swayed. But she was no mirage. Her bonnet hung loose, auburn hair catching the light in strands the color of copper flame. Her gaze swept the open field, not as if she feared it, but as if she were hungry for it. Caleb froze, hammer in hand, heart thudding against his ribs. She was beauty carved sharp, not delicate like porcelain but strong like the land itself. For a moment, the world fell quiet, the hammer slipping from his hand into the dirt with a dull thud. Evelyn slowed her horse, eyes meeting his. A moment stretched long, thin as a thread, before she gave the faintest of nods. Not a smile, not a word, just a nod that carried more weight than Caleb knew how to name. Then she urged her horse forward, leaving him standing at the fence with his breath caught in his chest. Redstone was small, and word traveled faster than smoke on a dry wind. By evening, Caleb knew who she was without needing to ask. The whole town whispered about the banker's daughter. She was educated back east, destined for refinement and comfort, and her father had promised her hand to Thomas Hale, a man whose money came from land grabs and iron deals. Thomas wasn't loved, he was feared. Sharp suit, sharper tongue, and a hunger for control that settled heavy over Redstone like a storm cloud. Caleb told himself it was none of his business. A ranch hand didn't set his eyes on a banker's daughter. That path led to ruin. Still, when he closed his eyes at night, he saw hers, steady, burning, unafraid. Days passed. He kept working, driving cattle, breaking wild horses, repairing fences, but every so often, he caught sight of her again. Evelyn rode farther than she should have, always alone, as if the horizon called her stronger than her father's voice could tether her back. She never spoke, but every time their paths crossed, she gave him that same steady look. And every time, something inside him pulled tighter, like rope drawn to its breaking point. The town didn't make it easy. One evening, Caleb stopped at the saloon for a drink. The place stank of sweat and tobacco, piano keys clinking under rough hands, laughter sharp with liquor. He sat in the corner, hat low, trying to stay invisible. Then Thomas Hale strutted in, boots polished, silver chain of his watch glinting in the lamplight. Men quieted when he passed. Nobody liked him, but nobody crossed him. Thomas leaned at the bar, loud enough for the whole room to hear. The banker's daughter's wedding dress is being stitched as we speak. By winter, she'll be mine. Caleb's jaw clenched, the whiskey burning in his throat. He stared down at the worn-wood table, forcing his hands to stay still. He had no right to care, no reason to bristle, but his chest ached as though someone had reached inside and twisted it. The days turned into weeks. Then, one night, fate pushed them past stolen glances. Evelyn was leaving the church social, arm gripped too tight by Thomas Hale. His smile was for the crowd, but his fingers dug cruelly into her wrist. Caleb saw it from across the street. He shouldn't have moved. He shouldn't have interfered. But before he knew it, he was there, hand catching Thomas's arm. "Let go," Caleb said, voice low, steady as a drawn gun. Thomas sneered. "This ain't your business, ranch hand." "It is now." Caleb's grip tightened. For a second, the crowd hushed. Men shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the crack of violence. Evelyn's eyes flashed wide. Fear? Yes, but something else too. Relief. Thomas finally released her, shoving Caleb's chest with a glare sharp enough to cut. "You don't know who you're messing with. She's mine." Caleb stood tall, taller than he felt, fists ready but steady. "She belongs to herself. Remember that." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to Thomas Hale like that. Caleb knew it. He knew he'd painted a target square on his back. But as Evelyn slipped free of Thomas's hold, her hand brushed Caleb's arm, soft, fleeting, but enough to brand him like fire. Later, when the crowd thinned, she found him behind the church, where the lanterns threw shadows against the wall. For the first time, her voice reached him. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Couldn't stand by. You don't understand. He'll come for you. My father, he'll side with him. Always." Caleb's eyes searched hers. "I don't care." She swallowed hard, a tear clinging to her lashes before she blinked it away. "Why?" The words came out before he could stop them. "Because you're worth it." Silence hung heavy. The night air carried the smell of hay and lantern smoke, the distant creak of wagon wheels fading into quiet. Evelyn's breath trembled, but she didn't step back. Instead, she reached up, fingers brushing his cheek, rough from days of work. "You'll ruin yourself," she said softly. "Maybe." Caleb's voice was firm, carrying the weight of a vow. "But you'll be wearing my ring by sundown." The words shocked him as much as they did her. Bold, reckless, but they were out, hanging between them like a banner raised against the world. Evelyn's lips parted, trembling with the weight of choices too heavy for her shoulders. Yet beneath the fear, her eyes burned with something fierce. Hope. That night marked the start. A promise too dangerous to ignore, spoken under the western sky. In a town ruled by money, fear, and a man like Thomas Hale, Caleb Turner had set himself on a path with no return. And as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the land in fire and gold, he knew one truth that rattled his bones. He would fight for her, no matter the cost. The morning after his vow, the town of Redstone seemed sharper, as if every nail in the boardwalk and every creak of a swinging sign carried weight. Caleb Turner woke before dawn, same as always, but his body felt wired, restless, like the whole world was holding its breath. He had spoken words a man like him had no business saying, promising a banker's daughter his ring before sundown. The promise rang in his head with every swing of the axe, every thud of chopped wood. By the time the sun burned over the horizon, sweat rolled down his back, but he couldn't sweat out what he felt. That fire, that pull toward her. Redstone wasn't a kind town to dreamers. Folks knew their place. Ranch hands stayed in the dirt. Bankers kept their boots clean. Caleb had always kept to his place. Until now. By noon, he couldn't stand it. He saddled Ash and rode toward the edge of town, dust trailing behind him. He didn't know if she'd come, didn't know if she'd even dare. But he rode anyway, heart pounding, to the small grove near the river where cottonwoods whispered in the heat. He didn't wait long. Evelyn came, her mare cutting through the grass with an easy stride. She wore no bonnet this time. The August sun poured over her hair, catching sparks of copper and gold. Her eyes found him instantly, and he saw the storm there. Fear, hope, and something fiercer, burning like wildfire. "You shouldn't be here," she said as she slid from her horse, her voice tight, her hands trembling against the reins. "Neither should you," Caleb answered, his tone steady, though his chest felt ready to split. Her laugh was sharp, almost bitter. "Difference is, when I break the rules, my father scolds me. When you do, they'll hang you by your pride." "I don't scare easy," Caleb said. "You should." Her voice softened, the edge falling away. She stepped closer, the air between them alive with the hum of something unspoken. "Thomas won't let this go. My father won't either. They'll see to it you're ruined." Caleb swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Then let them. I meant what I said. You'll be wearing my ring by sundown." Her breath caught, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, the whole world seemed to tilt. The rustle of leaves, the distant rush of river water, all of it faded. There was only her, and the promise hanging like a brand between them. Evelyn's hand rose, hesitant, brushing the edge of his shirt sleeve. "You don't understand what you're saying. A man like Thomas, he doesn't forgive. He'll come after you. He'll come after both of us." Caleb leaned closer, his voice low, steady. "Then let him. I've lived my life taking orders from men richer than me, stronger than me, meaner than me. But for once, I'll take my stand. With you." Her lips parted, trembling. For the first time, she didn't argue. She didn't push him away. Instead, she looked at him as if seeing the truth she'd been afraid to name. Then she whispered, "If you mean it, if you really mean it, then don't let go." He didn't. The afternoon burned hot, but Caleb and Evelyn lingered in the shade of the cottonwoods, speaking in hushed voices, piecing together dreams they both knew were fragile. She told him about her childhood lessons drilled into her until she felt more like property than daughter. He told her about his years drifting from ranch to ranch, never belonging anywhere. Two lives running parallel, never meant to meet, yet colliding now with a force neither could stop. But even as they spoke, shadows stretched long across the land, and the danger pressed in. Evelyn's time was short. Her father would expect her, and Thomas. Thomas had already caught wind of whispers. That evening, Redstone gathered at the saloon, same as most nights. The piano played fast, cards slapped against tables, and men's laughter rolled thick with liquor. But beneath the noise, tension buzzed. Thomas Hale stood at the bar, drink untouched, jaw tight. He'd heard enough. He'd seen the way Caleb looked at her. And worse, he'd seen the way Evelyn looked back. When Caleb walked in, dust still clinging to his boots, the room quieted like a church before prayer. Men shifted, sensing the storm about to break. Thomas turned, his voice smooth, sharp. "Heard you've been speaking out of turn, ranch hand." Caleb's hat stayed low, his face shadowed. "I speak when I've got something worth saying." The crowd stiffened. Thomas smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let me give you some advice. Don't mistake kindness in a lady's eyes for love. Women like her. They like the thrill of playing with fire. But fire burns, Turner. And you're not made to withstand it." Caleb stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. "She's not your possession, not your prize. She's more than you'll ever deserve." The room sucked in a breath. Thomas's hand hovered near his coat, where steel waited. But he didn't draw. "Not yet. You just signed your death warrant," he hissed. "And hers." Men muttered, uneasy. They didn't love Thomas, but no one dared to stand against him. Not openly. Caleb knew it, knew the odds, but he also knew he couldn't back down. That night, when he left the saloon, the air was heavy with threat. Eyes followed him, whispers trailing close. He saddled Ash and rode out of town, but he wasn't alone. Riders shadowed him, far enough not to be seen clear, but close enough he knew. Thomas's men. He pushed Ash hard, racing through the open land, the moon high in silver. He didn't stop until he reached the grove again. Evelyn was there, waiting. When she saw his face, the blood at his lip, the tension in his jaw, her fear broke into words. "What did you do?" she whispered, clutching his arm. "What I had to," Caleb said, voice rough. "He won't stop. Not now." Her eyes filled, but her spine stayed straight. "Then we can't either." For a moment, silence. Just the sound of wind in the trees, river rushing in the dark. Then Evelyn reached into her dress pocket and pulled out something small, glinting in the moonlight. A ring. Not gold, not jeweled. Simple silver, thin and plain. "My mother's," she said softly. "It's all I have that's truly mine." She pressed it into his hand, her voice trembling. "If your promise means anything, put it on me now." Caleb's breath caught. His hand shook as he slid the ring onto her finger, the metal catching the moonlight like fire. For a moment, the world stopped. No banker, no Thomas, just them, bound by a vow spoken under the stars. Evelyn lifted her chin, eyes fierce through the tears. "Then let them come. I'm yours." And as the night stretched deep, with riders lurking in the dark and danger pressing closer, Caleb Turner knew the promise he'd made was no longer just words. It was a line drawn in the dust, a line he would die before crossing back. The dawn broke red over redstone, bleeding light across the rooftops as if the sky itself knew violence was stirring. Caleb Turner had not slept. His body ached from the chase the night before, but his mind throbbed heavier than his wounds. He had slipped the silver ring onto Evelyn's finger, claimed her as his own in the eyes of the stars. But daylight had a cruel way of making promises feel fragile. By morning, the whole town was talking. Whispers slithered through the boardwalks, carried on the dusty air. The banker's daughter was seen slipping off toward the river. The ranch hand with nothing but grit and bone had been bold enough to stand against Thomas Hale. Some told it as scandal, others as a death sentence. In a place like Redstone, secrets never stayed buried. They were dug up and passed around like cards in a gambler's hand. Evelyn felt it too. At breakfast, her father's silence was sharper than anger. He cut his eggs with the precision of a man holding back fury, knife biting the plate until her nerves frayed. When he finally spoke, his words were as cold as the silver cufflinks on his wrists. "You've shamed this family." She gripped her fork tighter, steadying herself. "By riding near the ranch?" His eyes cut into hers. "Don't insult me. You know exactly what you've done. I hear you've been keeping company with Turner." Her throat closed, but she forced her voice out steady. "He's an honest man." Her father's jaw tightened. "He's nothing, and he will drag you into nothing with him. You'll marry Hale, as agreed. He's the only one with the means to protect this family's interests." Evelyn's chest burned with anger, but she swallowed it down, hiding the silver band under her sleeve. "And if I won't?" The knife clattered onto the plate. His voice dropped to a hiss. "Then you'll leave this house with nothing. No dowry, no name, no protection. Do you think Redstone will open its arms to a girl who defies her father?" She wanted to shout that she'd rather starve than be caged, but she bit her tongue. For now. Meanwhile, Caleb spent the day back at the ranch, mending fences with his hands but battling storm clouds in his head. His boss warned him plain. "You best leave her alone, Turner." The foreman muttered, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "I don't need the banker sending men with guns to burn this place to ash." Caleb said nothing, but the fire inside him refused to die. He'd never had anything worth fighting for, until now. He wouldn't back down, not even if the whole town pressed against him. That evening, as the sun dipped, Caleb and Evelyn met again by the grove. She came without a bonnet, hair loose, eyes shining with a mixture of fear and defiance. "They know," she whispered. "My father, Thomas, everyone." "I figured," Caleb said, jaw tight. And they're going to make me choose. If I walk away from you, my father keeps his business, his standing. If I stay, he'll see me ruined. He said I'd be nothing." Caleb reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers. "Better nothing with me than everything with a man like Hale." Her lips trembled. "You say it like it's simple, but it's not. My father, he'll make your life hell." Thomas already wants your blood. Caleb leaned closer, his voice steady as steel. Then let him come. I've worked for men my whole life, bent my back until it near broke. But I'll stand straight against him. For you, I'll stand straight against anyone. For a long moment, she said nothing, eyes shimmering with tears that refused to fall. Then she nodded, small but certain, as if her heart had finally found its ground. But peace was not theirs to keep. The very next day, Thomas made his move. Caleb had just finished branding calves when he caught sight of dust rising on the horizon. 3 riders, fast and hard, coming straight for the ranch. He didn't need to guess who sent them. They came in shouting, swinging off their horses with fists already curled. The first blow hit Caleb square in the jaw, rattling teeth, knocking him backward into the dirt. He staggered up, fists raised, eyes blazing. The fight was brutal, no words wasted. 3 against 1, boots slamming into ribs, fists cracking against bone. Caleb swung back, catching one man hard across the temple, sending him crumpling to the ground. Another lunged, and Caleb drove a fist into his gut, but pain ripped through him as a boot caught his side. The fight spilled into the corral, horses snorting and kicking at the chaos. Caleb fought like a man possessed, blood pouring from his lip, ribs screaming, vision blurred. But he didn't fall, not once. When the dust cleared, 2 men lay groaning in the dirt, and the third crawled to his horse, scrambling away. Caleb spat blood into the ground. He knew the message was clear. Thomas wanted him broken. This was only the beginning. That night, Evelyn sneaked out to him. Her eyes widened at the bruises, the cuts, the way he moved stiffly, every breath sharp. "Oh, God," she whispered, touching his cheek with trembling fingers. "What did they do to you?" "What they were told to," he said, wincing but standing tall. "But I'm still here." Her tears came hot, but her voice was fierce. "This can't go on. He'll kill you." Caleb caught her face in his hands, bloodied knuckles rough against her skin. "He'll try, but he won't take you from me. I meant what I said. Evelyn. Sundown. My ring. My word. I'll fight every damn man in Redstone if I have to." She pressed her forehead to his, her whisper breaking. "Then fight, because I can't go back to him. I won't." The days that followed turned Redstone into a cauldron. Every glance lingered too long. Every whisper carried venom. The banker kept his daughter under tight watch, forbidding her from leaving the house except for church. Thomas strutted through town with the swagger of a man already convinced he owned her, his threats thick with arrogance. But Evelyn still found ways. Slipped notes through stable boys, stole moments by the well, and every time, she clutched the silver band hidden beneath her sleeve. It was the only piece of freedom she had. By the week's end, Caleb knew hiding was no longer enough. If he meant to keep his vow, if he meant those reckless words, then he couldn't wait for Thomas to come again. He would have to stand in the open. He would have to claim her before all of Redstone, no matter the cost. The day came with the sky heavy and gray, storm clouds rolling over the horizon. The streets of Redstone buzzed, whispers flying faster than the wind. People lined the boardwalks, sensing something in the air. Caleb rode in, battered but unbowed, his hat low, his eyes sharp. He rode not for cattle, not for work, but for her. Evelyn stood on the steps of the church, pale as porcelain but with fire in her eyes. Her father at her side, Thomas standing close, smug and certain. The crowd hushed as Caleb dismounted, boots hitting the dirt like thunder. He walked forward, each step heavy with defiance, each breath a promise carved deeper into his chest. Thomas sneered, "You don't know when to quit, Turner." Caleb's gaze never wavered from Evelyn. "I told her she'd be wearing my ring by sundown. I meant it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The banker's face twisted with rage, Thomas's hand twitching near his gun. Evelyn's chest rose and fell, trembling with the weight of the moment. Caleb stopped at the bottom of the steps, blood on his lip, dust on his boots, but pride shining in his stance. His voice rang out, loud enough for all to hear. "She's not your prize, Hale. She's not your pawn, Carter. She's her own. And if she'll have me, I'll stand with her against every man here." The storm cracked above, thunder rolling like a drum. Evelyn's eyes filled, her hand rising, sleeve slipping to reveal the silver band. The crowd erupted, some with shock, some with awe, some with fury. And as the rain began to fall, heavy and cold, Redstone held its breath, knowing the fight for love had finally broken into the open. The rain fell heavy that night, turning Redstone's dirt streets into rivers of mud. The storm that broke over the town matched the one tearing through its people. Caleb Turner's vow in front of the church had split Redstone clean down the middle. Some admired his guts, others spat at his foolishness. A ranch hand daring to challenge Thomas Hale, daring to defy the banker himself, it was madness. And yet, it was a madness that stirred whispers of hope in those who had long bent their backs under the weight of men like Hale. But in the banker's house, the storm took a different shape. Evelyn was dragged inside the moment Caleb's words faded into thunder. Her father's grip on her arm was iron, his voice a hiss of fury that cut sharper than any blade. "You've humiliated me. Do you even understand what you've done?" His face was red, his breath sour with whiskey, his eyes burning with more fear than pride. She wrenched free, chest heaving. "I spoke the truth." "The truth?" he barked, slamming his hand on the table so hard the lamp quivered. "The truth is you've doomed us. Thomas Hale is the only man standing between this family and ruin. I've debts you can't even imagine, girl. Loans stacked on loans. Without him, we lose everything. The house, the bank, our name." Evelyn's heart pounded, her voice breaking but fierce. "Then let it go. Let it all go. I won't chain myself to him just so you can cling to your pride." Her father stepped close, his shadow looming. "You'll do as I say. You'll marry Hale. If you don't, you'll find yourself cast out with nothing but the clothes on your back. And your ranch hand won't be able to save you. He's one man. Hale owns this town." The words struck like blows, but Evelyn stood tall, chin high, even as her body trembled. "I'd rather starve in the dirt with Caleb than sit at Thomas Hale's table." Her father's face twisted with rage, but behind it was fear. He knew what refusing Hale meant, and he knew, deep down, that his daughter's fire wouldn't be smothered by threats. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the house shook, leaving her in the dark with her tears and the faint glint of the silver ring hidden beneath her sleeve. Across town, Caleb nursed his bruises in the loft above the livery stable. His ribs ached with every breath, his jaw throbbed, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the look in Evelyn's eyes when she had shown the ring to the crowd. She hadn't just chosen him in secret. She had chosen him before all of Redstone. That thought alone kept him upright. But Redstone wasn't asleep. Down at the saloon, Thomas Hale sat with his men, whiskey untouched, fury brewing darker than the storm outside. "She humiliated me," Thomas spat, slamming his glass onto the table. "A ranch hand dares stand against me in front of the whole damn town? And she sides with him." One of his men muttered, "Want us to finish Turner?" Thomas's eyes gleamed cold. "Not yet. Killing him now makes him a martyr. The town's already restless. They see Turner as some kind of hero. No, we'll ruin him first. Strip him of every ounce of dignity until even she sees he's nothing but dirt. And when she comes crawling back, I'll make sure she regrets ever defying me." The plan was set before dawn. By morning, rumors spread that the banker had called in Caleb's debts. Except Caleb had no debts. Still, the whispers grew. The banker declared Turner had stolen cattle from the ranch, falsified his wages, broken his contract. A ranch hand's word meant little against a banker's. Men began to look at Caleb differently, some with pity, others with suspicion. By midday, the sheriff came, a heavy-set man with a badge polished too often, his loyalties tied tighter to Hale's purse than to the law. He found Caleb in the stable, leaning against the stall, breath sharp from his cracked ribs. "You're wanted in town," the sheriff said flatly. "Charges of theft." Caleb straightened, wincing but unbroken. "That's a lie. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, you'll answer for it." Caleb's fists curled. He could see the trap closing, could feel the walls tightening. Still, he followed. To run would make him a fugitive. To stand, well, it was the only way left. The hearing was quick, cruel, and rigged. The banker's word was law, Thomas's presence heavy at the back of the room. Witnesses swore they'd seen Caleb with cattle not his own. Papers were waved, contracts read, none of it true, but all of it damning. Evelyn tried to speak, tried to raise her voice, but her father silenced her with a glare that froze her blood. In the end, the verdict was simple. Caleb Turner was fined more than he could pay and ordered off the ranch by sundown. The crowd dispersed, muttering, some shaking their heads in pity, others smirking at the spectacle. Thomas approached Caleb as he stepped into the street, his smile like a knife. "Seems you've run out of ground to stand on, ranch hand," Thomas said softly. "When she sees you with nothing, she'll come to her senses. They always do." Caleb's jaw tightened, blood rising hot in his chest. "You can strip me of work, of pay, of land, but you can't strip me of her." Thomas leaned close, his whisper venomous. "Then I'll strip her of you." That night, Evelyn found Caleb at the Grove, his few belongings packed in a worn saddlebag, his face lined with exhaustion and fury. "They've ruined me," he admitted, voice low, heavy. "By sundown tomorrow, I'll be gone. No ranch will hire me now, not with Hale's shadow on my name." Her heart cracked, but she stepped forward, gripping his arm with desperate strength. "Then I'll go with you." He froze, staring at her. "You don't know what you're saying. You'd leave everything." "I already have," she whispered, pulling her sleeve back to show the silver ring gleaming in the moonlight. "This is all that matters. I won't let them decide my life for me." He caught her hand, pressed it to his chest where his heart beat wild. "Evelyn, if you come with me, there's no turning back. They'll call you a traitor. You'll have nothing." Her eyes filled but did not waver. "Then nothing is enough, so long as it's with you." They kissed under the shadow of the trees, the weight of the world pressing in, but their fire burning brighter still. Yet even as they clung to each other, Caleb knew Thomas would not stop. This was only the beginning, and somewhere in the dark, unseen by either of them, a man watched from the trees, a messenger sent by Hale. By morning, Thomas would know every word, every vow, every desperate promise made in that grove. The game had shifted. The fight was no longer just for love. It was survival. By dawn, the gossip had already spread through Redstone like wildfire. Whispers in the general store, mutters in the saloon, murmurs on the church steps. Evelyn Hale had chosen the ranch hand, not the banker, not the man of wealth and property. No, she had given her heart to Caleb Turner, a drifter with nothing but calloused hands and a saddlebag. For some, it was a story of romance, reckless and wild. For others, it was proof of madness. But for Thomas Hale, it was humiliation sharpened into rage. The day began with a knock at Evelyn's window. She pulled the curtain aside, heart leaping at the sight of Caleb below. His face was weary, shadowed by nights without sleep, but his eyes burned with resolve. She slipped out quietly, boots crunching in the frosted grass as she hurried to him. "They'll come after us," he said before she could even speak. "Your father, Hale, maybe the sheriff too. I can't let you walk blind into it." Her breath rose in the cold air. "Then let's not wait for them. Let's leave. Ride until Redstone is nothing but dust behind us." He shook his head, jaw clenched. "If we ride now, they'll follow. We'll spend every day looking over our shoulders, every night waiting for a bullet in the dark." Hale doesn't forgive. He crushes. His hand closed over hers. "The only way we're free is if we stand." The words sank heavy in her chest. Freedom, not running, standing. She searched his eyes, seeing the stubbornness that had drawn her in from the first moment, an unyielding refusal to bend, no matter the odds. She nodded, though fear pricked at her skin. That same morning, Thomas Hale strode into the sheriff's office, his boots striking hard against the wooden floor. The sheriff looked up from his desk, eyes wary. "You'll press charges," Thomas said flatly. The sheriff scratched at his stubble. "Already tried that. Turner walked free enough. Then you'll find something else. Or you'll deputize my men. That ranch hand's a menace. He's riled the town, he's stolen what's mine, and I won't have him breathing my air another week." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "There's folks starting to side with him. The more you push, the more they whisper. Some say he's just standing up for himself. Thomas's hand slammed down on the desk, rattling the ink bottle. His voice was low, dangerous. "You listen to me. There is no standing up. There's order, and order comes from me. If you can't control this town, I'll find someone who can." The sheriff swallowed hard. He knew better than to cross a man like Hale. He nodded, though the taste of it was bitter. By afternoon, posters were nailed to the posts in front of the saloon and along Main Street. Caleb Turner, wanted for trespass, theft, and assault. The bounty was enough to tempt desperate men. And tempt it did. Caleb saw the first poster outside the general store. His chest tightened as townsfolk gathered to read, some casting him wary glances, others avoiding his eyes altogether. He tore it down, crumpling the paper in his fist. "This is how he plays it," Caleb muttered. "He'll turn every hand against me until I've got nowhere left to stand." Evelyn stood close, her presence steady even as fear tightened her throat. "Then we'll stand together." But together wasn't simple. That night, she returned home to find her father waiting in the parlor, his face drawn and pale, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table. He looked older than she'd ever seen him. "You think this is love," he said quietly, "but it's ruin. Hale won't stop, Evelyn. He'll grind that boy into dust, and he'll drag you with him if you don't see sense." She stood stiff, hands clasped at her waist. Sense would be marrying a man I don't love, living a life that isn't mine. Sense, her father snapped, would be protecting your family, protecting yourself. Hale offers safety. Turner offers nothing but danger. Her eyes filled, but her voice didn't break. "Then I'll choose danger." He stared at her, hollow. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might plead as a father instead of bargaining like a banker. But the moment passed. He turned away, shoulders slumping. "Then you're no daughter of mine." The words cut deep, deeper than she could admit. She left the house trembling, the ring on her finger feeling heavier than ever before. 2 nights later, the trap sprang. Caleb was riding back from the outskirts when shadows broke from the trees. 3 men, faces hidden, rifles raised. His horse reared, but Caleb swung from the saddle before a bullet could find its mark. The fight was brutal, fists and steel and fury. He dropped one with a strike to the jaw, another with a wild swing that cracked ribs. But the third caught him from behind, the butt of a rifle slamming into his skull. When he woke, his hands were bound, the taste of blood in his mouth. He was in the barn behind Hale's estate, the air thick with hay and the stink of horses. Thomas Hale stood before him, clean and calm, as though the storm outside had no claim on him. "You could have bowed out quietly," Thomas said, almost conversational. "Found work in another county, left her to grow wise. But you had to make a spectacle. You had to think you mattered." Caleb's head throbbed, but his eyes locked on Hale's. "I don't matter to you, but I matter to her. That's enough." Thomas's smile was sharp, joyless. "For now." He nodded, and one of the men hauled Caleb to his feet. "Take him to the sheriff. Let the law deal with him this time. If the law fails, well, there are other ways." But what Hale hadn't counted on was Evelyn. She had followed the trail of horses, heart pounding as she crept through the shadows. She heard the voices, saw Caleb dragged out. Her breath caught, fury burning away her fear. She knew then that this wasn't just about love. It was about choice, about the right to live her own life, free of her father's debts and Hale's chains. The next morning, Redstone gathered again. Caleb, bruised and battered, was shoved into the sheriff's office, a crowd forming outside. Hale stood tall, watching from across the street, his men at his side. Evelyn pushed through the people, her skirts brushing against the mud, her eyes blazing. "This isn't justice," she cried, voice carrying. "This is Hale's word against a man who's done nothing but work with his hands and live with honor." Some murmured in agreement. Others kept their heads down. The sheriff looked torn, sweat beading his brow as Hale's gaze burned into him. Caleb lifted his head, voice steady despite the blood on his lips. "You can lock me up. You can beat me down. But you can't take what's already hers. You can't take her choice." The crowd stirred, a ripple of unease shifting through them. Hale's face darkened. He stepped forward, voice dripping with venom. She's blinded by foolishness. But she'll see. They all will. When I'm done, no one will remember your name. Evelyn stepped to Caleb's side, slipping her hand into his, raising their bound fingers together for all to see. The silver ring glinted in the pale light. Then they'll remember mine, she said fiercely. And they'll remember I chose him. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy over Redstone. Then, slowly, a voice rose from the back. Let the boy go. Another followed. This ain't right. The sheriff's eyes darted, torn between the weight of Hale's money and the growing voice of the people. His hand trembled over the keys at his belt. Hale's jaw clenched, rage barely contained. The fight was no longer in whispers or shadows. It was out in the open now, burning like fire on the wind. Redstone had seen the truth, and truth was a dangerous thing. And as the storm gathered again on the horizon, Caleb knew the showdown was coming. Not in back rooms or barns, but in the street, under the eyes of everyone. For freedom, for love, for survival. The morning sun bled across Redstone like a warning. Light spilled over rooftops and dust, catching on windows that reflected a town holding its breath. Folks moved slow, voices hushed, eyes flicking toward the center of Main Street as though they already knew what was coming. Word had spread too far, too fast. Caleb Turner wasn't just a ranch hand anymore. He was the man who dared to stand against Thomas Hale. And by sundown, one of them would be left in the dirt. Caleb rose from the cot where he'd been held overnight. His body ached, bruises blooming along his ribs, blood dried at the corner of his mouth. But the fire in his chest burned hotter than the pain. Evelyn had come. She had stood with him in front of everyone. And that meant the whole town had seen Hale's power falter. They'd seen him rattled. That was more dangerous than any set of shackles. The sheriff lingered outside the cell door, hat in hand, eyes shifting like a man caught between two cliffs. He cleared his throat. You know Hale won't let this sit quiet. He's already riled up his men. Half of them been oilin' rifles since dawn. Caleb stood slowly, wincing as he straightened. Then it ends today. The sheriff hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice. You think you're ready for that kind of end? I've seen Hale shoot. He doesn't miss. And he won't play fair. Caleb's gaze hardened. Fair don't matter. Standing does. Before the sheriff could answer, Evelyn burst through the office doors, skirts brushing the floor, cheeks flushed with urgency. She carried no hesitation in her step, only resolve. Her eyes locked on Caleb's, and in them he found the steadiness he needed. They're saying Hale's calling you out, she said, breath quick. Sundown, right in the middle of the street. He means to make a show of it. Caleb nodded once. The words didn't surprise him. Hale lived off spectacle power displayed, fear sown. This was his stage, but it could be Caleb's too. The sheriff sighed, shoulders sagging. If you're both set on walking into it, I can't stop you. But I won't stand by neither. Redstone's been Hale's too long. Maybe it's time the town chose who runs it. Evelyn moved closer to Caleb, slipping her hand into his. Her touch steadied him, her voice fierce but trembling at the edges. Promise me you'll walk away from this alive. He lifted her hand, pressing it to his chest. If I don't, then know this, it was never for nothing. Loving you's worth every risk. Her throat tightened, eyes glistening, but she didn't cry. She only nodded, as though sealing a pact between them. By midday, Redstone was humming with nervous energy. Men leaned on porch rails, women whispered behind curtains, children darted through the alleys, wide-eyed with the thrill of danger. The saloon shut its doors, the church bell tolled once, and the entire town seemed to funnel toward Main Street as if dragged there by invisible hands. Thomas Hale stepped from his estate in a suit dark as midnight, his hat pulled low, his revolver gleaming at his hip. He walked like a man who believed the ground itself belonged to him, each stride measured, each glance cold. His men fanned out behind him, their presence a wall of intimidation. On the far end of the street, Caleb appeared. His shirt was worn, his boots scuffed, his hat tilted against the glare of the sun. He carried no army, no wealth, no power but the grit in his stance and the steel at his side. Beside him walked Evelyn, her chin lifted, her defiance as visible as his determination. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the two sides faced each other. Dust hung in the still air. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Hale's voice cut through it like a blade. "Step aside, Evelyn. This is between men." She didn't move. "Then it's already lost. Because no man who calls himself one would do what you've done." A murmur spread through the crowd. Hale's jaw twitched, his eyes narrowing, but he masked his anger with a smile meant to wound. "You think he can protect you? He can't even protect himself." Caleb's hand hovered near his revolver, but his eyes never left Hale's. "This ain't about protection. It's about choice. You can own land, you can own men, but you'll never own her." The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the street. Time slowed, the world contracting until only the two of them existed, two men bound by pride, by fury, by the weight of everything that had led them here. Then the sheriff's voice rang out. "Guns at sundown. No more words." The crowd held its breath. The seconds stretched long, each one a lifetime. Caleb's pulse hammered in his ears, but his hand was steady, his mind clear. He thought of Evelyn, of the fire in her eyes, of the way she had stood by him when no one else dared. That steadiness became his anchor. The sun touched the horizon. Both men drew. The shots cracked like thunder. Dust exploded. The crowd screamed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Hale staggered, his hand clutching his chest. Disbelief etched across his face. His revolver slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the dirt. He sank to his knees, eyes wide, as though the world itself had betrayed him. Blood bloomed across his vest, dark and spreading. Caleb stood firm, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun, his chest heaving. A graze marked his arm, blood dripping, but he was alive, still standing. The silence shattered. The crowd erupted, some gasping, some cheering, some crying out in shock. Hale's men faltered, glancing between their fallen leader and the man who had brought him down. Without Hale's shadow to shield them, they seemed smaller, uncertain, lost. Evelyn ran to Caleb, her arms wrapping around him, her tears finally breaking free. He held her close, his strength giving way for just a moment as the weight of it all bore down. Thomas Hale collapsed fully, the dust rising to swallow him. His eyes fixed on the sky, unseeing, his power unraveling with his final breath. The sheriff stepped forward, his voice carrying over the noise. "It's done. Redstone's done with fear." He turned to Caleb. "And you stood when no one else would." The town shifted then, as if a spell had broken. Men who once bowed to Hale now straightened. Women who once whispered now stepped into the open. A new air filled the street, not of victory alone, but of freedom reclaimed. Caleb holstered his revolver, his arm wrapping around Evelyn as he whispered into her hair. "It's over." But she pulled back, her eyes sharp through her tears. "No, it's just beginning." Because while Hale lay dead, his reach had been long. His debts, his deals, his enemies, they would come hunting. Redstone might cheer today, but storms gather fast on open plains. Still, for this moment, they stood together. Alive, unbroken, free. As the last light of day slipped behind the hills, the street of Redstone bore witness, not just to the fall of a tyrant, but to the rise of something far more dangerous, hope. And in that hope, Caleb and Evelyn found their strength. Whatever came next, they would meet it the same way they had met Hale, side by side, unyielding. If you thought Redstone's story ended with Hale's fall, you're dead wrong. His shadow stretches farther than this town, and the enemies he made won't stay quiet for long. Caleb and Evelyn may have won the day, but the war for their freedom has only just begun. Stick around. Chapter 7 will drag you deeper into the fire.